Hi guys, so in this video, I'm going to talk briefly about the carbon cycle. Right? And so we are still in the topic of ecology. And when we look at ecology, we have to look at the cycling of energy through ecosystems, but we also have to look at the cycling of matter through ecosystems, because nutrients are important to living things as well. Today we're going to Today, we're going to specifically look at carbon. There are other elements that are important to living things, nitrogen and phosphorus, namely, but today we're talking just about carbon. And so, carbon is absolutely critical to living things because the vast majority of the molecules that we're made up of are primarily composed of carbon. We are just a bunch of carbon with other cute things attached, arranged in very specific orders. Right. And so when we're looking at the ecosystem, right, the availability of carbon is very important. And so matter can never be destroyed, right? That's one of the rules. You can change the way it is, you can change its form a little bit, right, but it has to persist. And when you get down to an elemental level like carbon, it's really hard to destroy an element, a carbon. And so the carbon just moves from one place to another and takes on different forms along the way. And so when we think about carbon, we typically start by thinking about the carbon dioxide that is in the air. Right? There's a lot of carbon dioxide in the air, and the plants are using that carbon dioxide as part of the photosynthetic process of making food for themselves. The carbon dioxide is the source of carbon that is being used by the plants to build glucose molecules. So the plants take in the carbon dioxide, they use it for photosynthesis, they convert it to sugars. So now those sugars are chilling in those plants. If anything eats those plants, those sugars and those carbons are transferred to that thing that ate them. And so if a cow eats the grass, those sugars, hence those carbons, are now in that cow. If this human then eats that cow, those carbons are now in that human, and they become incorporated into part of our systems, right? And so all these living things here are all made out of a bunch of carbon. Living things, as you may know, die. Right? And one possible option for when living things die is that they don't decompose. They make this way down into the earth and they get squished, squished by the pressure of the earth. Right? And those things will turn into fossil fuels. They'll turn into oil. Right? So our oil that we use to power all of our mechanisms, where we get our gasoline from, right? Where we make plastic from, hydrocarbons are what they're called. Right? Those are all the remnants of things that died long ago. And then their dead bodies got pressed under the earth and turned into oil, which we refine into different products. Right? So all those products are primarily carbon. So if we burn any of those products, like when we burn gasoline, we're releasing that carbon back into the atmosphere, right? And it primarily goes back as CO2. When organisms like us or cows or plants, right, use their food source, when they take that sugar that's storing energy and they release the energy to do their work, okay, that process that does that is called cellular respiration. And cellular respiration generates CO2 as a product. Right? And so we eat the sugars, nom 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 nom. We digest the sugars. Our cells break down those sugars, use it to make ATP, which is something we'll talk about in a little bit later lesson. Right? But CO2, the gas, is created as a byproduct of that and released back into the environment. Okay? And so if we're looking at this story of trees or plants in general taking in CO2, using it to make sugar, and then things eating the sugar, and then releasing it through cellular respiration, this loop right here is the organic carbon cycle. So it goes photosynthesis, cellular respiration, photosynthesis, cellular respiration, photosynthesis, cellular respiration, back and forth. Okay? When we burn things, either in our factories or in our vehicles that are made out of hydrocarbons from the past that releases CO2 into the environment, Or if we're to burn a living thing, like if I cut down a tree and I burn that tree, that releases carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And so we're always releasing a bunch of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and then the plants and the other photosynthetic organisms are processing that carbon dioxide and turning it into sugar. Okay? So living things are made mostly out of carbon, important because when the living things are destroyed or consumed, that carbon is transferring from one place to another. Burning living things or once living things, such as oil, releases carbon gases into the atmosphere. We have the organic carbon cycle, which is photosynthesis uses the CO2, cellular respiration makes the CO2, and they just exchange it back and forth. And then it's important to remember that things do die, and those dead things are broken down by decomposers, right? Bacteria, small insects, things like that. And then they release that carbon that was in the dead thing into the atmosphere as well. Okay? So that's it. We're just following carbon around the atmosphere. Cool? Bye.